My name is Mark McGuinness, and this is the 21st Century Creative, the podcast that helps you thrive as a creative professional amid the demands, the distractions, and the opportunities of the 21st century. Welcome to episode 4 of the creative disruption season of the 21st Century Creative, where we are hearing stories of creatives around the world who came up with a creative response to the challenges of the pandemic. Today we meet Amrita Kumar, the co-founder and CEO of Candid Marketing, an innovative marketing agency in India. Amrita had to confront a brutal situation where coronavirus restrictions meant that she and her team were forbidden from carrying out their core business activities, and she had to decide whether she could hold on to the team that she'd spent so much time building up. But in the midst of the crisis, she remembered the seeds of an idea that she'd been wanting to launch for years, and decided that now was the time to go for it. Listen to today's interview for an extraordinary story of leadership under pressure and of the birth of Amrita's innovative new business, Mojo Box. On a personal note, I realized the other day that a few months ago I passed the milestone of 25 years as a coach for creative professionals. And I decided not to make a big song and dance out of it. You know, we recently had Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee here in the UK, and, I don't think I could top that, and apparently Elton John was busy this weekend anyway. But it is a nice moment to stop and reflect and look back, because 25 years of helping inspiring creative people who are doing inspiring creative things. It's been such a privilege and a joy. And, there are lots of different types of work that I've done for a while and then got tired of, or it wasn't practical to continue. But coaching has been an exception. It has held my attention in a way that nothing else has, apart from poetry. I was a psychotherapist for just under 20 years, and it was a wonderful experience, but I stopped doing that so I could have more time for coaching and writing. I used to teach a lot of workshops and classes, and that was great too, and I do love the buzz of being in a room with people. But for me, the problem with training was that after a while I got tired of saying the same thing over and over. But with coaching, it's different every session. I can't predict what my client is going to show up with. Of course, we have goals and plans, but who knows what new and exciting things have happened in their life since we last spoke? Who knows what brilliant ideas they've had, or what new challenges they've had to deal with? Or what will occur to them in the course of our conversation? So it means I have to show up and be in the moment, and improvise in every single session. And the time flies. I typically coach for 2 hours at a time, and some people say, well, what do you talk about? But really, it's not hard. There's always plenty to talk about, and the time flies. And it's probably a rare thing to get up on a Monday morning and still be excited and looking forward to doing the thing that you've been doing for 25 years. So I'd like to just pause and say a huge thank you to everybody I've ever coached, which at this point is several hundred creatives. And a special thank you to all the coaches and mentors over the years who have helped me become the coach I am today, who, in roughly chronological order, have been Catherine Kirk, Ray Keedy-Lilly, John Eaton, Pamela Gawler-Wright, Mimi Calvati, Chris Bilton, Ruth Leary, Brian Clark, Naomi Dunford, Peleg Top, Rich Litvin, Steve Chandler, and Kristin Linklater. So, before I embark on my next 25 years, I want to share one of the key principles of creating great work that I use with just about every coaching client I work with. When we think of productivity, we typically think about tasks and to-do lists, working habits and routines. We focus on how to make the most of our time on a daily or at most a weekly basis. All of which is great, but if this is all we focus on, there's a danger of getting stuck at the tactical level, getting caught up in the daily round of tasks. We end up making decisions every morning about what to work on today, based on what feels urgent or important at that moment, not what will bring us the most fulfillment and success over the long term. If you're serious about your creative ambitions, you should not be making that decision every morning. If this is where you find yourself, it's time to stop and look at the big picture. Crucially, you need to think about your work in terms of projects, not tasks. Because ultimately, the level of your achievement will depend on the quantity and quality of the projects you complete. What do I mean by a project? A substantial piece of work, a book, a movie, an album, an event, a product, a major artwork, or a collection of smaller works. A single poem or song or painting wouldn't count as a project, but a book of poems or an album full of songs or a series of paintings would. What do we remember Beethoven for? The symphonies. What do we remember Shakespeare for? King Lear, Macbeth, Hamlet. What do we remember Sylvia Plath for? Ariel. What will we remember Martin Scorsese for? The Godfather trilogy. What will we remember Kate Bush for? Hounds of Love. We won't remember them for the tasks they ticked off their to-do lists, only the major works they produced. So once in a while, lift your eyes from your daily task list and your weekly calendar and look to the future. Ask yourself, what do I really want to make? What will fulfill me the most? What do I want to be known for? If you're struggling to answer that, here's the negative version. When I'm lying on my deathbed, what kind of work will I regret not doing if I never get round to it? That should give you the kind of project that you want to focus on. Books, albums, events, movies, or whatever. Next, divide your year into manageable chunks. Partly because our children are still at school, I divide mine into 3. New Year to Easter, Easter to July, September to Christmas. Some people prefer to divide their year into 4 seasons. So 3 or 4 months is a good timescale to think in terms of. It's big enough to do something substantial, but small enough to hold yourself accountable. Now it's decision time. You want to pick one project and make that your focus for the next 3 to 4 months. Why just one? Because if it's a project worth doing, you will need single-minded focus to push through the inner resistance and the external obstacles you will encounter. And if you're anything like me, at any one time, you probably have several projects that you're keen to get on with. But unless you focus on one at a time, it's hard to build the momentum you need to make it happen. If you try to focus on 2 or more projects, they will jostle for your attention every day, and each project can become a distraction from the others. But when you have a single project as your main focus, you don't need to decide what to do on a daily basis. Whatever time is available in between your other responsibilities, you simply devote it to your current main project. And This saves you a huge amount of mental effort each day because you don't need to decide all over again what your priorities are. And it forces you to stick with the project when it gets difficult and push through the obstacles. It also means you get to live inside the project for an extended period. When I'm writing a book or recording a season of this podcast, I'm inside the book. I'm inside the season for weeks or months at a time, not just the hours that I spend actually writing or recording it. So part of me is always thinking about it and probably figuring things out at the unconscious level. I notice connections in the world around me and in articles and books I read, or even news stories or conversations with friends. And the book or the podcast or whatever it is all the better for this immersion in the project. I'm not saying you completely ignore your other projects. Sometimes you have to do a little bit here and there to keep them alive, especially if they involve other people. But you should always have a single project as your main focus and do everything you can to stop the others from distracting you from it. And at the end of your allotted 3 to 4 month period, it's time to stop and go back up to 10,000 feet to review your progress and consider your priorities for the next period. For example, last year I was working on the funding, launch and promotion of my poetry podcast, A Mouthful of Air. So it was the main focus for my spring, summer and autumn seasons. At the start of this year, it was time to rebalance and focus on the 21st Century Creative podcast again. So I made that my main focus for the spring. Now that it's finished and rolling out, I'm turning my attention to another project over the summer that I'm talking about in the 21st Century Creative Patreon group. And when I reach the autumn, I know I will have several projects vying for my attention. So it will probably take me a while to think through which one to prioritize. So how do you decide which project to focus on when you've got several competing for your attention? That's a great question, and I'm going to answer it in next week's episode. Right now, I suggest you write down the answer to 2 questions. Firstly, that question about what kind of work you really want to do and be known for, whether it's books or albums or movies or exhibitions or whatever. And secondly, make a list of all the projects and ideas for projects that you currently have that you're itching to get on with. Next week, I'll give you some suggestions about how you go through that list and decide which one you're going to focus on next. If you enjoy the 21st Century Creative, then you might like to know I offer an alternative take on creativity on my other podcast, A Mouthful of Air, where I interview poets about the writing process behind their poems. Here's the poet Mark Anthony Owen talking about why he limits himself to using just 9 poetic forms for all the poems on his online poetry project, subruria.com.
I just thought, right, that's it. I've got 9 forms. Every single thing I write from now on and everything that I revise from the past is going to fit one of those 9 forms. And that was it. And the reason I constrained myself like that is because I am quite a scattered person creatively. There are lots of different directions that I could take. Before I became a writer, I did actually want to be a visual artist, for example. So there's other sides to me that would kind of be fighting each other to produce whatever it might be. But when I'm constrained, and this is true as well of my professional life as a copywriter, when I have very little space in which to do something, it forces me to be inventive and creative and to strain for that absolute right word or phrase or image, such that with just very few words and very few syllables overall, I can conjure up in the mind of the reader what it is I want them to think or feel or see or indeed hear.
You can find A Mouthful of Air on all the usual podcast platforms, with a new episode every 2 weeks, to give you a regular connection to the muse. In October 2019, Amrita Kumar was celebrating becoming CEO of Candid Marketing, an innovative experiential marketing agency with offices in Bombay, aka Mumbai, and Delhi in India. It was the culmination of 21 years of work on the company that she had co-founded with her partner Atul Nath. A moment to savour her success and look to the future. She was full of plans for 2020 and completely unaware of the impending pandemic that would threaten the very existence of the business she'd worked so hard to establish. When Candid started, experiential marketing, also called brand activation, was a new concept in India. Atul described the agency's work as anything which is not mass media. Their team went out into the streets of Bombay to meet people face to face, sharing product samples and asking for their feedback. They offered consumers new products to discover and provided valuable data to their clients. Over the course of these 21 years, Amrita and Atul grew Candid into one of India's most awarded experiential marketing agencies, named as the #1 brand activation agency in the country by the Economic Times, with a team of over 120 staff and a client list including Bacardi, Cadbury, Disney, Coca-Cola, Vodafone, Dyson, and Uber. Candid's strength is meeting consumers face-to-face, getting products into their hands and eliciting honest feedback. And of course, this is precisely the reason why the agency was so vulnerable to the pandemic. Because when COVID struck and India went into strict lockdown, Amrita and her team were forbidden from carrying out their core business activity, going out onto the streets to meet consumers in person. In this interview, Amrita tells me the story of how she worked hard to establish Candid and then had to rethink everything in the face of the pandemic. As a leader, she had to make some hard and eventually excruciating choices, particularly around whether and how long she could afford to keep hold of her team. And in the midst of the turmoil, she came up with a creative solution to her problems by launching an innovative new service that grew into a whole new business, Mojo Box. Mojo Box is an online platform that helps consumers discover and experience new products before buying. They sign up via the website mojobox.online, and for a small convenience fee, they are sent Mojo Boxes containing a range of new products to try. The value of the products is far greater than the convenience fee, and Amrita's members told her that the arrival of a new box was a little moment of fun and discovery in the long lockdown days. Amrita used Mojo Box to help her big brand clients reach new consumers in spite of the restrictions. And in the process, she grew her membership numbers to 270,000 members and kept her own business afloat during the pandemic. Now, she's looking to the future with renewed optimism. Interestingly, Amrita tells me in the interview that Mojo Box actually grew from the seeds of an idea she'd had for years. But it took the pandemic disruption before conditions were right for her to test it for real. This interview with Amrita is a great story of courage, leadership, and innovation in the face of disaster. And also of the value of leaning into the future, being ahead of the curve in your industry, because you never know when that innovative and risky looking idea could turn out to be your safety net. Amrita, how did you get started on your creative path?
Um, Actually, this whole journey of experiential marketing, creative experiential marketing, and what it basically means is interactive, one on one, creative way of engaging brands with consumers, genuinely happened by accident. I I I did my master's in Leeds. I actually then took on a job in London for a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was a work permit fiasco. And because the company I was working for lost its funding, and my work permit was attached to that company, so I had to come back to India. So when
Mm-hmm.
I came back to India, I started working for .com. Those were the days where that was the whole .com bubble, and there was a
Right.
whole lot of funding going on. And I
Mm-hmm.
started working for a gifting and e-greeting .com,
Mm-hmm.
which was, I think, funded by the Rupert Murdoch company and all of that jazz. And I basically had a very bad time, and I was extremely disillusioned with the whole working environment in India. And I was just wondering what to do. Should I look at ways to, maybe leave Bombay again? And somebody I knew at that time told me to meet Atul, my business partner now, saying
Yeah.
that, he's doing something different. Why don't you meet him? And, when I met him, I realized that he was doing something different. So when he started Candid, and he's the one who actually started Candid in 2000. Yeah, I joined 2 years after they started. So when he started Candid in 2000, it was a very simple thing for him. He basically wanted to engage brands with consumers. Anything, but his one line thing was anything which is not mass media. As simple as that.
Oh, really?
Anything which is not mass media. So it could be literally a one-on-one sampling, standing on the road, or, so that was literally the one line brief, how he started Candid. And I joined him 2 years later, and that's how Candid happened to me. And, over, I think it's 2022. So that's 20 years of Candid.
Wow.
And it's been interesting because he and me are very complementary in nature. So slowly, I took over the creative and the client side of the business, and he took over the financial and, the whole running of the company. And then after, I think in 19, I kind of took over as the CEO of Candid from him,
Mm-hmm.
because, he was busy starting something else, which unfortunately also stopped due to COVID. But yeah, so as I said, I literally stumbled upon it because of meeting Atul. And then it was a matter of finding, one's legs in the kind of work and then making it your own. Because 20 years ago, nobody knew experiential marketing in India. We were literally the first in many, many things in India.
Right. So, I mean, I guess I'm curious about what was the thinking behind anything but mass media, because these days that would seem a lot more obvious than it must have done then, right?
Exactly. I think the thinking behind that, and I know because I joined the journey too, was that uh, the big agencies had advertising covered, and you had the
Yeah.
Ogilvy's and
Yeah.
those Leo Burnett's, and also they had advertising covered, and we felt, and that's one of the reasons I connected with Candid, is because I obviously did my thesis on this also, is that there is this whole need of between advertising and the consumer. So we kind of internally we used to say air cover and field
Mm-hmm.
soldiers. You need the air cover through advertising, and but you need the foot soldiers to go
Right.
into
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
enemy territory too. So that was the whole thinking, that at the end of the day, mass media does not give you this tangible feel
Mm.
of the product. And now it's very easy for me to say, oh, it was all about discovery, but we never even thought about it as product discovery those days. It was
Yeah.
just the need of putting the brand, putting the product in a consumer's hand, and they touching and feeling it and saying, okay, this looks interesting, I want to try it. So as I said, we did a lot of firsts. We did these mobile, massive trucks, which we would convert them into these floats, and we would have live demos and live stations. And it's crazy because now when I say these things to even people who work with me, they just look at me and say, oh, okay, either a big deal or really maybe she's just lying about it because it sounds way ahead of its time. But we've done all of this, so it was just fun. It's fun. I sometimes just go through old pictures and I wonder oh my God.
And so you really get up close and personal with a consumer.
Yes.
So I want to go back and pick up on something you said about as you grew into the role, you made it more your own. You made Candid your own. Can you talk about that process a bit?
Yeah. So I do believe that the client relationships, the kind of work you do reflects on the kind of person you are creatively, right? So obviously, since I started slowly spearheading, and Atul was obviously a great mentor and taught me, he has taught me everything he knows. And that's why we worked together for 20 plus years. What ended up happening is that the projects were an echo of me creatively. So whether it is making a giant installation or creating something technologically, it's everything which interests me or my creativity was reflected in the client projects. Unlike maybe, I don't know, if Atul was to be the head of creative for Candid, maybe his style of creative and content would be different,
Right.
So, and obviously the relationships and the brands also reflect that. I the kind of brands I would identify with or the kind of clients I would be excited to work with at the end of the day are the ones you end up making relationships with and hence doing good work for. And I believe that's true for every agency, right? At the end of the day, the brands, clients, and the work reflects you personally. It's very difficult to come up with something creatively which is not something you are excited about.
Absolutely. I think this is so important that you find, well, I mean, the way I always look at it is I want to find a client who inspires me because I know that brings out the best in me.
Completely.
I always say this isn't a luxury because I know what fires me up to deliver the best that I can do as a service provider. And I think any creative needs to know what is it that brings out the best in you.
You've hit on something which is very important to the way we do business, and I think it drives us every day today also, is around, I think, 7-8 years ago, we had this disastrous project which had there was no creativity in it. It was just execution, and we had a nightmare. And I remember I was meeting my dad after a year, and I was I was on con calls at 2 a.m, 3 a.m, solving fires.
Yeah.
And and I just Atul and we had a chat the next day, and we were like, this is not the kind of work we want to do. I think we just need to get off the treadmill. We felt like we are on this treadmill, and because we had expenses, we had a big team, you have to take on projects. So suddenly the team and the clients were deciding the work we do and not the joy we were feeling. And we literally took a decision to stop doing projects where there's no creativity, there's no content, there's no technology. And it cut down our business for the first. When we took this decision, we actually created a manifesto, which now sounds a little naive, but we created a manifesto for ourselves, which, is the kind of work we want to do. And we said we're all about discovery. And that's the day we said, okay. And I think after that, a couple of months, 4-5 months down, we lost a lot of business because one, we refused. And second is obviously the clients were like, when you turned around and say, okay, we'll do this project, but we don't do this project of yours. And they were like, no, then don't do any project of ours, because we want somebody who does everything. And we lost a lot of business. But I think I'm blessed that we could take that decision, and we kind of, I think it was like work we want to do at the end of the day. And it was tough. it's very easy to now say, and it all sounds very good, but it was tough.
Right. Yeah. Now you're looking back on the success story. But yeah, of course, I always think no is a scary word to say, but it can also be a very creative word, because when you close the door to the stuff that you don't want to do, and in your heart isn't you, that opens the door to do the thing that really is. But when you're looking at the bottom line and you see the impact, particularly at the beginning, it can be tough. So I'd like to fast forward to late 2019, right at the beginning of 2020, just before the pandemic arrived on our screens. Tell me where Candid was at that stage and the kind of work that you were doing.
So October 2019, I think, is when Atul announced me taking over Candid completely.
Mm-hmm.
And we had 2 offices, Bombay and Delhi. We had relationship clients like Bacardi, Cadbury, Disney, like the who's who kind of
Right.
in the Indian market. And, around, I think, 120 people as a team. We were an agency with 120 people, 120 plus people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was good. The whole point was me taking over Candid and making it the agency, the creative content and activation agency. That was the plan. That was the intent before COVID hit us.
And I mean, it's just, you say that was the plan, that was the story, that was the movie you were living in at that stage.
Yeah. For me, it was a career high. This is an agency. I spent 20 years, well, at that time, 18 years or 19 years of my life. And I was just announced that, Atul is stepping back and I'm taking over. And, I was taking over nationally. I started meeting clients and telling them that, okay, this is it. I'm it now. No more Atul in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
We started year planning for the next year. So a lot of our clients, unlike Indian clients who is 1st April new financial year, but the international clients are obviously 1st Jan to 31st December. So, in September, October, November, you start planning projects for the next year.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the planning work for next year had started already, and that's what I was busy in before, COVID came in. So, we were setting revenue targets and talking about expanding the team and all of that.
And, thinking about what you've just told us about where you came from, this was success, right? This was what you had worked for and invested and built up. And then what happened?
And then COVID happened and it hit us first slightly, a few projects got cancelled and then a few more projects got cancelled. Mm-hmm. And, obviously with the activation business, you bill what you execute, right? The creative and the content bit is a small part of the whole billing. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of actual physical production, the manpower who stands in the aisles in the stores, the trays they carry, the games you fabricate to engage about brands. So, obviously the billing hit us very badly by Jan. And that's when we realized, okay, this is serious. And also what happened is, a lot of things we had pre-booked and pre-built suddenly turned to zero. So it's revenue-wise, it hit us in February. And in March, we kind of stood up and took notice and said, this is not going anywhere. And we had to have a very, very tough call with everybody where we kind of told everybody that we had to go to 50% salary till further notice. And we were hoping against hope that, this thing will blow up by July, August.
Yeah.
But obviously, we were wrong. We were so wrong.
And just so that we understand the context that you were operating in, what was it? Because it was so much dependent on face-to-face and interaction with consumers, and that was all restricted.
So I'm sure everybody knows about the lockdown in India. So it was a.
Well, tell us a bit, because I know we've got listeners all over the world and everyone's got different experience of lockdown, but maybe just paint the picture for us a little so we understand what you were dealing with.
Yeah. So I think the the lockdown in India was announced, I think, in March, and
Mm-hmm.
I think 2024. But it was literally announced with like no notice, no preparation. So in March, I think it was mid-March, I'm not sure, I think 20th, 21st,
Yeah.
22nd type March. It was just announced, the Prime Minister came on TV and said, there's going to be a lockdown. And in a business where, when you do activations, everything is face-to-face interaction, right?
Yeah.
Whether it is store sampling, whether it's mall engagement,
Right.
whether it is events, consumer events, everything is face-to-face. So suddenly business went zero because you couldn't execute anything. You couldn't do anything at all, you know. So nothing. My team was sitting at home and nothing was done. So all projects were put on pause and hold and eventually canceled. And yeah, so and also the thing is that even after the first lockdown was then relaxed, the numbers were still so high that even
Yeah.
if clients would brief us, I couldn't risk sending the team out there and getting
Sure.
infected. So
Of course.
the fact is that you just couldn't execute. And even if you did execute, and I would risk the team, there are no consumers out there. Everybody was home, so just the physical interface was just not possible, and we just went from 100 to zero.
And I guess it must have really come home to you what it means to be the leader. You've been crowned CEO in October, and then suddenly you're dealing with this. What was it like to be in the hot seat?
Oh, I, I have grayed. I have grayed. I have white hairs for the last 2 years. It's been a extremely draining, turmoil-filled journey last 2 years. Because like I just shared, from the first conversation of the 50% salaries to eventually telling people that we have to let them go. We've gone from 120 plus to now 10 people.
Right.
And getting messages in the middle of the night for money and vendors needing to be paid. It's been tough. It's been really tough. And uh, you know the fact is that we carried as many people as we could, and for the longest time,
Yeah.
we did as little as possible every month because we
Yeah.
had only that much money in the bank at the end of
Mhm.
the day, and vendors had to be paid. So I think every day Atul and me just literally lived day to day. And the other thing, and the worst thing is about this whole thing and being the leaders, there's no end date, right? It's
Yeah.
not like I knew that it would finish so and so date, and hence I have this much
Yeah.
money in the bank, and so I can plan for
Right.
this. And
Right.
and clients won't pay outstandings, and it was just the ugliest side of business one can ever hope to imagine to run. And when you take over an agency, you wish that you don't do all of this, but just my life the last 2 years has been the messy side of running the agency than the interesting side.
So where did you find your strength to step up as a leader and do what needed to be done?
Oh, I'm guessing internally, my business partner Atul, my friends and family. But I think just the fact that you know we've been a very close knit team, and it's almost been like at least family. So
Mm-hmm.
I think the principle we led with from day one is we'll try and do right by everybody. Even if we let go of someone, we let go of them. There is no kind way of letting go of someone. I have realized that. And they will never understand, obviously, and I don't expect them to the
Mm-hmm.
journey which we are going through.
Yeah.
But I think, the guiding principle was just try and do the good by everyone as much as possible. So yeah, so it's been tough. I think I don't think I've handled it very well. I must say there have been days of tears, anger, frustration, fighting. It's been crazy, but yeah.
And going back to the first part of 2020, at what point did you start to think, well, hang on a minute, we actually need to do something quite different here? We can't just wait for everything to come back.
I think what happened is after the initial shock and around April, May, I started reading a lot about, the changed consumer behavior internationally. And we've always, as a team, Atul and I, we've always discussed about scaling up sampling to the non-physical world.
Mm-hmm.
And many, many years ago, when we used to discuss it, there were always a lot of hurdles to it. And one of the primary hurdles being, digital comfort, transactions online. And obviously, with COVID, consumer behavior changed. Indians got more comfortable transacting online. Indians
Right.
got more comfortable putting more information, personal details online.
Mm-hmm.
Internet payments, digital payments exploded, obviously, because of COVID. So suddenly, I literally went back to all our old discussions and, started thinking about it. And the thought process was, let me start something, let me just jump, I'll aim later, let me see if there's any seed, literally, because I didn't realize what we were creating. And when we started in June, it was literally a project. It wasn't supposed to be another company, it wasn't supposed to be another product, it was just another project to pay the bills. How do we go out there and tell brands we work with that, we know that consumer discovery has got limited. We know you still need to get consumers to figure, to find out about you.
Mm-hmm.
You need to discover consumers. Consumers need to discover about you. Aisles are obviously not an option. Malls are not an option. So here is something we are trying. Do you want to give it a go? And that's exactly how we started in June.
So this is really interesting to me because one of the things I heard, I think it was last year on James Altucher's podcast, I think it was an economist who was saying that, I can't remember his name, but he said that the pandemic isn't going to change any trends, but it will accelerate a lot of them. So in your case, what I'm hearing is you had this idea for a new way of engaging consumers and getting products into their hands, but you were kind of ahead of the curve from where consumers were and maybe where your clients were in India at that time. And then the pandemic kind of moved that curve forward.
Yeah. Because one of the biggest issues in our earlier business in activation was the cost per contact, right? If you
Right.
stand in a store, you are governed by the amount of people who walk into the store.
Mm-hmm.
If you stand in a mall, you're governed by the number of footfalls in the mall.
Yeah.
And obviously when you create a physical structure, you create a pop-up store or you create, trays to sample food, all of that comes at a cost. So overall activation or experiential marketing is costly as compared to digital ads or
Right.
billboard
Yeah.
advertising. And that is one of the biggest reasons brands wouldn't spend too much of money also in it, because cost per contact was never easily
Mm-hmm.
calculated because
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult to calculate the secondary exposure and that, and also it's expensive.
Yeah.
So that is the reason why we've been trying to think about digital sampling. And like you said, it just accelerated with, the COVID conditions.
And what about clients? Did you find them more open to experimenting and trying new things?
So we were blessed to have some relationship clients. So kind of, the low hanging fruits were approached first.
Yeah.
Some arms of friends were twisted. And we put together the first edition, as we call, of Mojo Box to try it out. And we did, I think it was a 10,000 edition in just Bombay to try it out. And we did it. We started in June and we finished the box very quickly after that. And we were like, okay, this has merit.
Okay, so tell us more about the box. But what is it? How does it work? And what are the benefits?
Sure. So how Mojo Box works is it's an online platform, online discovery platform,
Mm-hmm.
and a consumer needs to go and register on it and give us certain details. The more you interact, the more details we would like of you,
Yeah.
which helps us then kind of understand what kind of products which interest you.
Mm-hmm.
Are you somebody who's a wellness enthusiast? Are you are you a mother with newborn kid? Are you a foodie? Would you like to try food samples?
Mm-hmm.
And how we work is there are two parts to us. One is we create curated boxes with samples, which could be basis a genre or a target audience. So we've done, I think, now 16 boxes, 16 editions in total.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a wellness box, there's a men's personal care, there's a women's personal care, and if you want this box of samples to try, and we kind of use this line very try before you buy. So because
Yeah.
you just have to. So the box of the value of samples, we try and keep it like almost 600-700 rupees.
Mm-hmm.
And we tell the consumer to pay us like 120-130 rupees for courier and handling and logistics. So it's almost like a value of 6x or 7x. And and we as an aside, we charge to kind of filter the quality of the consumer, because
Mm-hmm.
we also realized from our first edition that if you just give it for free, you don't get the right kind of target audience you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah.
So charging a nominal amount kind of makes sure that the consumer has skin in the game, and it is
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's serious about sampling.
Yeah.
And so when the consumer pays, the box is dispatched. We then collect feedback from the consumer. We collect pre-sampling feedback and we collect post-sampling feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all done online. And we've got very, very healthy rates. We get feedback percentages anywhere from 30 to 42% on each edition.
That's great.
Which I've been told from brands is a very good percentage, because when they do other initiatives, they get 15%, 18%.
Yeah.
So, that is something. We do incentivize feedback with something called Mojo Cash, which you can then use to, it's like loyalty points, which
Mm-hmm.
you can use to buy further boxes. So feedback's collected. And once you receive the box of samples, you fill out the feedback on whether you like the samples, whether you're going to buy them. And we share all of this with the brand. We do not share first party data. We've been very clear from day one. We don't share first party data with brands, meaning your contact details, name, phone number, email ID. So you're not going to get harassed by brands just
Sure.
because you've been sampled by them. And I think that's very important. And we don't intend to also do this anytime in the future.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm stressing on this is because, at least people in India know how it is to get just bombarded with messages.
Mm.
And, you've given your number in some website and it's sold to
Right.
20,
Right.
other people.
Right.
So
Right.
we don't share first party data at all. And that's one of the reasons a lot of brands have also chosen not to work with us, which we are fine with. But
Yeah.
we do share the feedback, we do share the consumer stimuli. And over and above this, we also work with the term micro-influencer. So what a micro-influencer means is they are not these big influencers. They are not celebrities. They are not movie stars.
Yeah.
Micro-influencers are normal people who we look at are influential in their circle or in their social circle or their area. Like if they're a food blogger, and we've just got two criteria. We look for anybody who's got like 5,000 following, or an engagement percentage of 10% in Instagram. Engagement means how they interact with their audience and their posts, which is easily calculated. So,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a mother who blogs about her children, So we believe that they make more of a difference than a celebrity whom you end up paying a lot of money and then you don't believe, because they may or may not be using that product. So we've got over 3,500 people like these micro-influencers who've registered with Mojo Box too. And we kind of use them to amplify the messaging and talk about the samples and the different products one can discover through various editions. So that's also there for every edition. So brands get a huge benefit of just a lot of interesting content being made on social media because of the sampling exercise. And, like I was talking to you about, when we used to do activation cost per contact and calculating exposures was a very difficult thing in the offline business.
Yeah.
The other thing was that when you sample a bar of chocolate on a store aisle, no one's going to post a picture about it on social media saying, I got this chocolate on the store aisle. But if you get a Mojo Box, people, make reels and posts and tag brands, and there's a whole lot of social. So the social amplification of the whole sampling process was something. Again, it's very easy for me to say, "Oh, this was the plan," but I must tell you, it was an interesting discovery we stumbled upon and then built up on it.
Well, I always think that designing a business model is really about designing a system that creates value for everybody. So you've got the brands, you've got the consumers, you've got the micro influencers, and obviously there's Candid. There's a lot of moving parts in this. It's like, the image that's coming to mind is assembling a watch, the old fashioned way with all the different gears and whatever, because you want to get it all moving in time together. So I'm curious. What results have you got for the different groups? How are consumers responding? How about clients, and also the impact it's had for Candid?
So we've got. I think we started in June last year, so it's been, a little more than a year and few months. June we started in Bombay. We rolled out to the rest of the cities in October last year. So let's say 14 months of complete, national presence. We've got 240,000 people who've registered with us.
240,000.
I think that's, yes.
Wow.
And those 240,000 people have given another 200,000 data of members in their households. Because at the end of the day, the box may or may not is for the whole house, not just for you. And you could be living with your partner, you could be living with your parents, which a lot of people do in India. So we have 450,000 consumer points to sample to. In terms of brands, I think we've got, as I mentioned, I think we've done 16 editions so far, which is around 220,000 Mojo Boxes.
Wow.
And we've got over 80 brands who worked with us in the last 14 months. So those are numbers. And out of the consumers who've registered with us, around 57% are women. So it's not skewed to a gender, which I love, because that was the other notion I had, will women only be going for samples and men won't be interested? It's really hard to see, it's almost, I would say it's almost equal because it fluctuates, some months.
That's great.
Yeah.
I noticed your Instagram, you have some, boxes specifically for men.
Yes, we do. It's interesting. So our engagement in our community is really high. And it's interesting how people have started telling us that you must have these kind of boxes. You must have that kind of box.
Oh, really?
We weren't planning to do a mother's box anytime soon because we had a hard time. When we launched it in September, it went by really slowly in the sense that we didn't have much takers to finish that edition quickly. And it took us almost 2 months to finish that edition. And we were like, okay, maybe new mothers don't want to experiment as much as other people want to experiment, And last month and a half, we've actually been getting comments on our posts saying, why don't you have brands for new mothers to try out? And we're actually trying to get one together for the end of Jan. So it's been very interesting. So we've got boxes for men right now. We've got a My Wellness box, which is, obviously New Year, everybody's into this whole wellness and health thing. So we've got one for that, and we've got one for the household right now. So we had a party box in December.
Of course.
with
No.
cocktail mixers and
Great.
lemonade and all of that. Yeah. So
And now it's time for the post-party box.
yeah.
So I think this is really great because, as you've touched on, a lot of the time, a lot of people see marketing as a nuisance, as an intrusion, as a bombardment. But you've actually got your consumers coming to you and saying, can you send us more? And can we have this thing and that thing? So it's great that you've flipped around that perception of marketing to get that level of engagement.
Yeah. So uh, we've got literally two different kinds of people. There are three kinds of people. One who've tried us and never have come back to us, obviously, because at the end of the day, we are not an essential service,
Yeah.
right? Discovery is not a primary need for someone, like ordering lunch on, Uber Eats. So we've got that, and we realized that was a challenge. So we kind of have pushed the bar on newer and newer brands. So we keep our editions exciting, and that kind of worked because we've got a very healthy percentage of people who've come back and bought more than 3, 4, 5 Mojo boxes. So that's one. And second is, I think at the end of the day, the whole collation bit and the whole curation and collation bit, I think is exciting for a consumer, because when you get that box, it's almost like getting a gift for oneself. And you're sitting at home, COVID, you're working from home. Everybody's a little, brain fried, as they say in India.
Yeah.
So it's a nice reprieve when you get a box full of samples, and it's lots of things to go through, and then you feel empowered by giving feedback to the brands. We also then send an SMS to the consumer with a code they can use to buy it, so that they save money instead of paying full price. So, at the end of the day, I think, it definitely is an interesting way to experience different brands.
And how is it changing Candid? I mean, you've got this whole new arm to your business now. What difference is that making?
A lot. 95% of my time goes on Mojo Box.
Really?
So in a way, see, because with Candid, even now, right? We had done some projects in October, November, December, and projects started getting cancelled again. We had 2 very large activation planned for January, which has got cancelled because of now the Omicron surge, right?
Yeah.
And I don't see that changing. What's to say, the next variant doesn't come with the letter N, obviously, but so it's not going to change, and I'll be foolish to think it will. So the whole team, there are 4 or 5 team members in the team who've actually just literally upskilled and have just started doing only Mojo Box work, because I don't see activation coming full swing anytime soon.
So how does the future look then for you and Candid with this new, I mean, obviously it's cost you a lot, and we can't minimize that or bring back those people, but in the sense that it's allowed you to move forward with an idea that you had on the back burner for a while, and that's now paying dividends. How does the future look for you?
I think the future looks interesting, and it's not a cop out, because for us, we are planning on how to scale up Mojo Box more and more. We've kind of have a lot of plans for Mojo Box. We are launching some new features in the next 1 week or so, where one can make their own Mojo Boxes instead of it being a pre-curated Mojo Box.
Right.
And there are many other things which, so we've got a couple of launches of different features lined up in the next 3-4 months. So I think the future is going to be about Mojo Box for us, because I don't think people will just come back and, sample how they did also. I think that has left the Pandora's box, and the beast, I think, will be difficult to put it back in.
Right.
Maybe there'll be a new hybrid behavior, I eventually, whenever it is, and, COVID becomes like a common cold or a flu, don't think people will just go back to what it was 2
Yeah.
years ago. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
there will be a hybrid version which will be created, and I think Mojo Box then definitely has a place in that world, uh, and that's what we are excited about in creating.
Well, I've said right from the beginning of this thing, my wish is that we all come out of this with more choices than we went in. And to hear you saying you're excited about what you're creating now is fantastic, considering everything that you and the team have gone through. So for somebody listening to this, we can't consign COVID to history yet. We're all still dealing with some version of the challenges you've described and the changed landscape you've described. What would you say are some of the biggest learnings that have come out of all of this for you that maybe other people could take to heart in their own work and their own business?
I would say number one is it's okay to go slow. As a person, I get extremely impatient and frustrated. Just the fact that this is stretched for 2 years is a huge sign of
Mm,
is a huge source of frustration for me. And even creating Mojo Box or going live with Mojo Box, going live with a feature, or it not working, or an edition not going fast. I think going slow is okay is the first thing I would say, because it's been a huge learning for me, you know because in the candid part of my life, everything was fast, 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 like
right,
get the
right,
project
right.
fast, deliver
Huh.
fast, execute fast, give it to the client wants the revert fast, the client wants the pitch fast.
Mm,
Everything was in literally a fast forward cycle. And I think the last 2 years has taught me going slow is okay. In fact, it's absolutely okay, and allow yourself to go slow. I think that is the first thing, whether it's personal or whether it's work. The second is, I read this somewhere and I just don't remember where I read it, but I so love it. If you're not embarrassed with the first image or first version of your product or business you've launched too slow. And I don't remember where I read it, but I love it, because if you had seen the Mojo Box website or the pages or the clunky way we would take information in June, it's an embarrassment. Okay.
hmm
But I'm glad we did it, because, I'm just glad we just pushed the car out of the garage, as they say, because
hmm
I don't think we would have reached where we are if I would have overthought everything at that moment. I think it was very important for it to just get it out of the house at that time. So as I said, I just wish where I read this sentence, but it is so true. It is so true that, it doesn't matter that it's clunky. It doesn't matter it's ugly. If
Mm,
you've got a thought process, just go for it and just get it out there. Surprisingly, the brands have been the most understanding. Clients have been the most understanding in our whole evolution, you
really.
know? Yeah. So, because everybody's learning, I hate using that word unprecedented, so I will not, but nobody's
Well,
experienced this thing,
no, no.
Everybody's learning, everybody's going through their way. Brands have had factories shut because of COVID outbreaks and stuff. Nobody's gone through all of it. So it's amazing how much empathy has gone all around. I've literally had a client call me and say that, as an entrepreneur, I can just imagine the stress you're through. So if you just want to call and cry, I'm there.
Oh, wow, what a great
I
client.
have never I have never had a client say that to me when I was running Candid, so
Yeah,
it's amazing.
that's lovely. So go slow, but maybe not too slow, because you've got to
Not
get
too
it
slow.
out there.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, great.
Look, yeah.
All right. Well, I think this would be a really nice point for you to set your creative challenge to our listeners. So, for anybody who's new to the show, at the end of every interview, I ask my guest to set you, dear listener, a challenge. And this is something that will stretch you creatively and maybe personally and in other ways. And it's something that you can do or at least get started on within 1 week of listening to today's interview. So, Amrita, what's your creative challenge?
I think we get caught up in our world, when we are doing something or we are creating something, we kind of get caught up in our world. And I think it's interesting to do a stimuli check every once in a while. So whether you're a creator or a content person or a creative person or a marketing person, I think it'll be interesting to go out and just talk to 10, 15 consumers, buyers, theater, art, gallery owners, whoever it is, and get stimuli from them, and then change something or create something to, address what they tell you. I would say it's a great, I think stimuli checks, and we keep talking in marketing, especially, it's great to talk to consumers, but we don't do it enough. We just don't do it enough. We schedule it to these really big sessions once in a while. So it would be nice to just go out there and talk to people.
I think that's a great challenge, and I think it applies to the fine artists among us, as well as the commercially focused entrepreneurs and marketers, because even, just a conversation with somebody who read your book or came to your gallery or listened to your music, or, obviously if you're a musician, you're used to getting more live feedback. But it can make such a difference when you see, and you really hear and see the difference it made to somebody. So I think that's a lovely thing to do. Amrita, thank you so much for sharing your very hard-won wisdom. And it's been an inspiration to me listening. And I love some of the, I'm going to think about that, going slow and feeling embarrassed. That's something I will certainly take with me. Where can people go to find Mojo Box online? Who's able to get it? Is it just for people in India? You don't deliver to Bristol yet?
Yes, right now, no, we don't deliver to Bristol yet, but I may just send you one. In India, we only deliver to India, and we are on Instagram at I Want a Mojo Box. It's as simple as that.
I Want a Mojo Box on Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll make sure we link to that from the show notes. And Candid Marketing?
Again, on Instagrams, Candid and MKTG.
Great. And then the website?
CandidMarketing.com.
CandidMarketing.com. Great.
And mojobox.online.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Amrita, and all the best with Mojo Box for the future.
Thank you.
You have been listening to the 21st Century Creative, hosted by Mark McGuinness. You can find the notes for today's episode with more about my guest, as well as all the backlist episodes at 21stcenturycreative.fm. If you enjoyed the show, then I hope you will subscribe in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, and take a few seconds to swipe and leave a rating for the show. If you would like to take the 21st Century Creative Foundation course to help you carve out an original creative career, you can sign up and get the whole course for free at 21stcenturycreative.fm/free course. And if you are an experienced creative and you're curious about getting my help as a private coaching client, then the first step is to go to 21stcenturycreative.fm/coaching questions and answer the questions on that page. Thank you for listening. I hope you'll join me again soon.